Hello everybody and welcome back to The Sit Down, where we're going to talk about the Eddie Hearn Conor Benn saga that just continues to unfold day by day, giving us much entertainment, I must say. So to break it down, obviously I've spoken about this in the past and I want to rehash it for those of you who perhaps didn't catch former episodes. I also don't want to speak this subject to death, but to give you an idea, Conor Benn has, worked with Matchroom Boxing and Eddie Hearn. He's a legacy Matchroom boxer. They've really built him up from the ground from since he was very, very young. Obviously, he's Nigel Benn's son, so he does have a profile of his own in that way. But Matchroom Boxing and Eddie Hearn specifically had a very close working relationship with him, and they worked with him very closely for a number of years, and they built his profile to where it is today. Conor Benn is a boxer who, in my opinion, hasn't really been tested at the level that he should be at. He's never won an area title, and yet he's got a massive profile, and a lot of that is actually to do with his promotion. Now, obviously, some years ago now, he was scheduled to fight Chris Eubank Jr., and he was found with adverse findings in his blood sample, so essentially indicating that he'd taken some performance-enhancing substances. Now, he at the time went on record and said it could have been to do with having too many eggs and a very high egg consumption, something to this effect, which I must be honest, the majority of the boxing public weren't buying it, and it became a little bit of a gimmick at the time. Either way, it was a tough time for him. I think we can all acknowledge that it would have been a very, very tough time for him. Eddie Hearn specifically and Matchroom Boxing very much stood by him. That was very clear to us on the outside. He garnered a lot of support from them. And, I'm sure they had reasons outside of just liking him as an individual, but there is also something to be said about the fact that it was very clear that they have a close relationship that maybe falls outside of just business. Eddie Hearn is close to specific boxers, as you would be, and Conor Benn definitely fit that profile. Anyway, Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing stood by him through this whole saga. They managed to get him fight in America because he couldn't fight on UK soil because the British Board of Boxing Control, had to investigate him, etc., etc. So, yes, they essentially made sure that he was earning money in that period of time while he was still being investigated. I think that's an important and a key element of this. Now, more recently, Conor Benn left Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing and signed with Zura Boxing, which is headed up by Dana White. And he signed with them for a one-fight deal, which will see him, do the fight for the sum of $15 million. And then after that, he becomes a free agent. Now, a lot of people are kind of commenting that this all feels a little bit confusing, a little bit shady. But for the purpose of just sticking with what we do know objectively, signs with Zura Boxing, huge shockwaves across the boxing community. After signing with Zura Boxing, Eddie Hearn is feeling slighted because he's saying that essentially he had no real conversation with Conor Benn around it. They didn't even have a phone call, which did feel really cold-blooded because obviously, you've stuck by this guy, you've done loads for him, how could he not have the respect to call you? Cool, when it comes to the actual taking of the deal, I think we can all agree that if someone's offering you $15 million for a one-fight deal, you're going to take it. But I think a lot of people problematized and found very, uncouth, for lack of a better word, that Conor Benn didn't do it in this, more respectful, more considerate manner. And I think that's what Eddie Hearn had a problem with at the time. And yeah, anyway, then Conor Benn does an interview with Gary Neville, footballer. And look, no one seems to be asking Conor Benn specifically hard questions around this, which Eddie did infer in an interview that he gave to Kugan Cassius and IFL. And I think that that's fair. I know on the one hand, as someone who interviews myself, you do want to get the best out of someone that you're interviewing, so you don't want to press them too hard. But on the other hand, there are questions that need answering. Either way, Gary Neville was kind of speaking around this and whatever. Something that really bothered me was just like, I just feel that Conor Benn seems to always want to paint himself in this picture of like being, you know, like the good guy and like not the villain. And it's like, sometimes, bro, like you messed up, right? And you can just own that, and you can just be like, you know what? Yeah, I should have done X, Y, and Z. Anyway, in this interview with Gary Neville, he absolutely claimed that Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing did not lend him any money, did not cover his legal fees. Right? He said that. He categorically said that. And then that's kind of like gave him the reasoning of like, you know, well, who's going to put food on the table and who's going to, and I hear it. But the point being, he claimed categorically that no money was lent to him. Okay. Eddie Hearn, in this interview with IFL and Kugan Cassius, he absolutely contested that and said, well, no, when Conor Benn was buying his house, wanted to buy this house in Brentwood, he asked to borrow £250,000, £250,000, and Eddie Hearn lent that to him in good faith, not as an advance on a fight, but in good faith. Of course, when he then had the fight with Chris Eubank Jr., eventually had the fight with Chris Eubank Jr., he paid that money back. Cool. Then Conor Benn at some point wanted to buy a Rolls Royce. I believe it was a Rolls Royce. So he asked Eddie for £300,000 or something to this effect. And Eddie was like, okay, cool, mate. Well, I can do that, but it's going to have to be an advance on a purse. So he lent that as well. Then, well, I mean, I don't quite understand the timeline around this, but essentially what Eddie Hearn claimed then is that, well, he's lent him now £550,000, no interest on it. And in the end, he couldn't buy the Rolls Royce because he had to use that money to pay for his legal fees. But either way, those legal fees were paid with using the borrowed money. So the money was actually lent. And Eddie Hearn's been in contact with Conor Benn's lawyer to be like, what on earth is going on here? Like, that is factually incorrect, and you know it's factually incorrect. And the lawyer has said something along the lines of, okay, he can go on record next week, as in this week, to say that no, money was in fact lent to him, but he won't apologise because it wasn't specifically lent for the legal fees. Either way, it's all a bit crazy. In the midst of all of this, Eddie Hearn is, you know, I think in a way justifiably shitting a little bit on the fight that he's got going on with Regis Prograis this weekend, claiming that Regis Prograis is, you know, not in fighting fit condition, shouldn't even be in the ring. Regis Prograis has obviously hit back and said that's not the case at all. We're very intrigued to see how this story develops as the fight week goes on. I'm sure, well, I hope some of the media will have some more hard-hitting questions for Conor Benn. I know that there's a couple of people who might. So I'll definitely be keeping ears to the ground for that. I'm pretty sure that's the saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, guys, I'm intrigued to know what you guys think of it. For me, I think it's scandalous. Like, it's absolutely scandalous. Cool, you want to make the move to Zuffa Boxing, do your thing. But don't live in a world of delusion where you're just saying things that are absolutely not true about people who have supported you, like really, really backed you. I don't think that's, yeah, I don't love that. Anyway, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. And in the meantime, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, comment, share, and like, and we will catch you on the next episode of The Sit Down.